Good afternoon. I'm Congresswoman Alma Adams, and I represent North Carolina's 12th Congressional District. I bring greetings to all of you attending the Mama Love Black Maternal Health and Reproductive Justice Town Hall on behalf of Speaker Johnson, Minority Leader Jeffries, my colleagues in the U.S. House, and the citizens of the 12th Congressional District of North Carolina, which includes the city of Charlotte, as well as Mecklenburg and Cabarrus counties. As a Black mother and grandmother who serves as a founding member and co chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, I'm honored to speak with you today. The conversations being held will help spread awareness of the Black maternal health crisis and save lives. As those of you attending this town hall know, we're facing a serious public health crisis in this country. Moms in America are more likely to die in childbirth than mothers in any other developed nation. 80% of pregnancy related deaths in the U.S. are preventable, and this crisis is only getting worse. Even more troubling, Black women, regardless of education levels or socioeconomic status, are nearly 4 times more likely to die from preventable pregnancy related complications than women of other races. As a Black woman, this issue is very personal to me. That's why my co chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, Representative Lauren Underwood, and I introduced the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act, which is a collection of 13 bills that provide a roadmap for our healthcare systems, our providers, and society to finally make Black maternal and infant health a priority. It's a bill without a partisan agenda because Black maternal health is not a partisan issue. It is a life and death issue. And let me be clear, our granddaughters shouldn't have fewer rights than our daughters have, and our daughters shouldn't have fewer rights than we have. As you explore the topic of reproductive justice, know that you have an advocate in the U.S. House who's willing to be arrested at a protest for her views on this subject. Simply put, abortion care is health care. I've had the privilege of sponsoring and introducing legislation that creates opportunity and promotes equal rights for all. Every woman of every nation has a right to a safe and legal abortion. But for years, politically motivated laws have endangered that right. While this Congress is not compelled to act, I will continue to stand at every turn for a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions. And that's why I voted for and the House passed legislation like the Right to Contraception Act. This legislation establishes a statutory right to obtain contraceptives and for healthcare providers to provide them. And it protects Americans from state and local legislation that would deny people access to contraceptives. My voting record speaks for itself. I am for the rights of women everywhere. I support health care for all, and I believe every woman should have the right to choose. With my role on the Black Maternal Health Caucus, I spend a lot of time working on social determinants of health. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said, of all of the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane because it often results in physical death. Unfortunately, that's still true. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that there are major gaps in care based on socioeconomic status, race, and other factors. Yes, we have made progress, but maternal mortality and morbidity rates in the U.S. continue to go in the wrong direction, and the gap in outcomes between Black and white mothers remains. Demographics should not determine your destiny, but it's going to take addressing social determinants of health from poverty to education to transportation and environmental factors to save lives. It's past time for lawmakers to put their own agendas aside and put the interests of the people they represent first. If you want to change policy, You may have to change policymakers, but when it comes to health care, every woman deserves safe and affordable access. You can count on me to continue this work with you, to stand up, to speak up, and to get into good trouble when necessary. So please, after this event, continue to be advocates for Black moms and the passage of the Momnibus Act because Black mamas can't wait. Thank you. God bless.
Yes.
Well, Ashe and
I
amen,
know.
Representative Alma Adams. Wait, she said if you need new policies, you might have to change the policy makers.
All right,
Welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors here on SiriusXM's Urban View. We are in the second panel of our Mama Love Town Hall, Black Maternal Health and Reproductive Justice. And we have some new faces on the panel that we want to introduce. We still have Dr. Cherie Livingston, Shawnee Benton Gibson, and joining our panel are Faraine Griffith, someone who I consider one of my sisters in civics. Faraine was born and raised in New York City, and she spent the past 3 decades contributing to her community passionately and powerfully. She's recognized as a strong leading advocate with the sole purpose of increasing civic responsibility and community engagement. And she is joining us today representing the office of one New York City public advocate, Jamani Williams. She is in charge of community organizing for civics and community empowerment with a specific emphasis on maternal health. Faraine Griffith, always a pleasure to have you in the building, sis. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lurie.
Absolutely.
My civic sister, yes.
My civic sister. If there's a census battle in the
and
making.
these are my reproductive justice sisters.
That's right. That's right. So it's a whole new sorority up in here. Also joining us is Chanel Portia Albert, the mother herself of 6 children, which I think, quite frankly, deserves its own round of applause. However, in addition to that, yes, okay. In addition to that, she's also the founder and chief executive officer of Ancient Song, which is a national birth justice organization working to eliminate maternal and infant mortality and morbidity among Black and Latinx people. They, in addition to providing doula services and training, they offer community education. They advocate for policy changes, all supporting reproductive justice and birth justice. Her work with infant and maternal health has led her across the globe. You've done work in Uganda, where you served as a maternal health strategist. You've gone to Ethiopia, where you're working currently with the Ministry of Health to establish a doula program throughout Addis Ababa, which is crazy because in our first panel, we talked about the ancient wisdom and the ancient knowledge that we had prior to enslavement and colonization, and that you are doing this work now coming from here, going back to the motherland. You know, the circles are circling. I'm just saying. But we are so grateful to have you here with us. In addition to all of that, you've done a lot of work. Yeah, they're going to give you applause. You've done a lot of work with government at all levels, and so we are grateful for all that you were going to bring to this conversation. And then finally, though she is being mentioned last, it's not because she is least. She is the New York State Assembly member, Stephanie Zinneman, who I will confess is my representative. So we are very grateful for her joining us today. She was elected to the 56th district. She's joining us via Zoom. She was elected to the 56th district in the New York State Assembly. She represents the historic neighborhoods of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Crown Heights, and Brooklyn. And she joined the legislature, extraordinarily experienced in government, nonprofit, and small business. And she has been pioneering a lot of the legislative work that's happening at the state level that is also designed to support maternal health and reproductive justice. Welcome to all of you joining us and sitting here in the panel. We appreciate you. So we are turning now.
Stephanie is speaking.
Stephanie, are you saying something? You're on mute because it's 3 years of a pandemic.
I know. Well, I just want to say that it feels like my entire district is there. Hey, ladies, how are you? I can't wait for this discussion. So proceed.
Well, let's get into it. We spent the first panel talking about maternal health, and I want to talk now about reproductive justice. And Chanel, I'd like to start first with you. Can you help us understand? Just give us a definition. When we say reproductive justice, everything is column bust these days. What do we mean when we say reproductive justice? What is it that we're speaking to?
So what we are speaking to is the right to have children, the right to not have children, and if we are having those children, the right to have them and be in spaces and community that are free from violence, from unprovoked harm, that are free from systems of oppression. And so just the right to exist, right? And to birth our babies and raise our children in affirming ways. And again, if we don't want to have children, to be able to do that also in an affirming way, right? That really centers us in what it is that we want and see for ourselves and lifting up our own bodily autonomy and our basic human rights to reproduce or not to reproduce.
So we're not talking about what's happening in that medical room. We're not talking about what's happening on the birthing table. It's the ecosystem,
Right.
if I understand you correctly, that surrounds all of those choices, decisions, and experiences in a way that I think goes beyond just being pro-life versus pro-choice.
Right. Well, you know what it is it's beyond the episode of pregnancy, right? And it's understanding that when someone becomes pregnant or decides to not be pregnant, it doesn't happen, you know, that decision doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? And there are different social aspects that are influencing that, right? And so, yes, you have the things that are happening within the birth room, right? Racism, bias, you know, the blatant disregard, you know, the myths around Black birth and Black bodies. But it's also, what are we facing in our communities? Do we have equitable, you know, healthcare infrastructure? Do we have schools that are lifting up and supporting our children in affirming ways, right? Where they can see themselves? You know, do we have the social things that we need, like equitable housing, right? We talk about housing, right? And that's that, right? And, you know, and just the educational system and food access, right? And so, like, when you decide to become a parent, you're not just thinking about like, oh yeah, I'm gestating. You're also thinking about, do I have those things, as, you know, to support me through my process of becoming a parent, right? And really affirming my parenting, because there's a lot of blame that is put on parents, but we're not thinking about, like, do they have the things that they need to parent? And so when people say like, oh, you know, I'm pro-life, but then you're not pro policies that support, that support
contradiction.
people. Come on, it's a blatant contradiction. So, you know, it has to go hand in hand.
Yeah, indeed. I'm reminded when in our first panel, Karma, you had said that postpartum lasts forever. Like, it doesn't just start. And I'm hearing in what you're saying, Chanel, that this is something, this reproductive justice concept is beyond that moment. And I'll be quite honest, I now have an almost 17-year-old. I know it's hard to believe, but the boy's almost 17 years old.
I cannot believe that.
We knew each other before either of us had children.
Yes.
And I was just telling a sister friend, because, you know, the 17s are they're challenging. They're a difficult group. It's a tough group. I was like, nobody, when I was looking at the Love's commercial and determining between cloth versus diaper, nobody told me about teenagerhood. I was thinking about smelling baby toes and the good breath and all of that. Dating age. Child, don't get me started. It's going to be a whole nother panel. Assemblymember Zinnerman, we heard at the outset from Congressional Representative Alma Adams, who was speaking with us about what's happening at the congressional level. And that's something that's going to have impact across the nation. New York, as are many states right now, is becoming a particular site of importance in the battle for reproductive justice, because we are sort of sitting in opposition to what we're seeing happen in a variety of places: Texas, Iowa, Idaho, Florida, places where we are seeing a real restriction on, forget abortion rights. Well, no, we ain't gonna forgive abortion rights, but in addition to restrictions on abortion rights, restrictions and policies that would prevent an expansion of reproductive justice. Talk to us about what's happening at the state level in New York, because on this show, we spend a lot of time talking about what's happening in other spaces that are taking rights away. How are states like New York showing up to present a different outcome?
We are standing up as the guardians for reproductive justice. I mean, we immediately went into, I think we had a rally the day of the decision. We got in the room and started to figure out what are all of the protections that we could put in place to guard New York State, to give and serve as a model to other states as to what they could do as we see this march across the country to steal our own body autonomy. And then we started thinking about other ways that we could help support those who didn't have access in their states so that they could come across the border and have safe haven here. And so we're all talking about the migrant situation right now, and rightly so, but we have also become a safe haven for mothers and families who want to make their own choice about what it is that they want to do with their family, or whether they want to choose to have a child or not. And what we are really grateful for is for this room, for people like you, because you have the on the ground experiences that continue to keep us informed, right? I always tell people the first part of my job and the most important part of my job is listening to my constituents. And so when we're understanding what's happening in Woodhull Hospital with a Christine Fields, when
Yes.
we understand what is happening in med schools where we're still using biased systems to train the next generation of health professionals, when we don't fund birthing systems over hospitals that still can't get it right, we have work to do, but we know what those things are. And one of the things that I've pledged to do is really work with my federal and my city's or municipal colleagues to look at legislation that is sound, that has passed or is on its way being passed, and then writing resolutions so that we are lifting up that powerful legislation so that we are then covered city, state, and federal. For far too long, we've had bills passed in one place. We protect New York State, but then the feds are slow to come on board. We have this omnibus bill that's been around for a while, and we've had very little victories there. And so the only way to ensure that happens is to get to the people, go to the ground level and say, listen, we can, on a city level, municipal level, pass this bill. We can pass it on the state. Now we know our state is covered. And once we can do that, we can then march across the country and start to support other legislative bodies who want to do the right thing, but may end up with an executive that hasn't ever thought, or they have one of their houses that aren't supportive of those things. And the last thing that I just want to say, because I know we've got other questions, is, and it was really important when we started talking about the ecosystem of how someone can bring a child to life. And certainly, as we sit here, there's a joint hearing going on housing, all right? And that's ground zero. If you cannot sleep, if you do not know.
Oh, wait, no, the devil is a liar. Hold on. You went mute. Every so often, the devil tries to sneak up into Lurie Daniel favorite show and stop good information. Assembly member, you are still on mute. So we're going to have that worked out. Okay, there we go.
We're going to work it. We're going to work it out. But you may want to go on. I just want to say that it is important to know that this is not just about when a family walks in the hospital for the first time. It really does start from the very beginning. And one of the things that we have to do as government is think about what is the outcome that we want to have. At who is the 21st century New Yorker, and how do we want that person to live? And then we have to structure our support, our resources around how that person reaches that goal. And there should be no reason that a young woman who had the support of her family, had a birthing plan, had access to doulas, could walk into any institution and not live to take care of her child. And now we have an entire another ecosystem we have to create around that child so that they can recover from the trauma. And we don't have a plan for that yet, but we are working on that as well. So much more with regard to, specific legislation, but I did just want to set the stage for what we're doing collectively, and then what we can do to support other states.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the devil said, right when you got to talking about the housing hearing, don't you worry, Satan, we're going to get equitable housing for the people. You can forget that. But one thing the assembly member said that I think is important, she referenced the border. Yes. And instantly the border for a lot of us is the southern border, where we have a lot of migrant communities trying to navigate their way to seek asylum. But what we should also be thinking about is the state border, right? Because within our states, it's almost a very Octavia Butler-like moment where like every state is its own mini country. Dystopian in the mud. But this idea that if I'm raising my daughter in Texas, if I'm raising my daughter in Iowa, in Idaho, in some of these spaces where we have seen a complete retrenchment of access to abortion care, access to reproductive health care, which quite frankly, our abortion is health care. But if I'm in a space like that, and I know my cousin lives in New York, where they have a completely different reality, the fact that I have to, as a part of taking care of of the reproductive needs in that moment have to consider travel to another state to get access to health care that I no longer have a right to, largely because of the decisions of old white men who have never born a child and never could. But that's sort of the reality that we're dealing with right now. Farain, you are with the Public Advocate's Office, and unfortunately, many of you all live in jurisdictions that you ain't got no public advocate, and that's a shame. That is a shame. Talk to us a little bit about what the Public Advocate does and why this office has made such a commitment to maternal health.
Yeah, so the office it's the voice of the people, the advocate for the residents of New York City. We are the watchdog to the city agencies and the mayor's office. So that's like the role in Omnibus with the city council. So that's the role of the office. The work that we're doing specifically around maternal health, which by chance just so happened when the office, a former colleague at the office, Jamela Rose, I will shout her out for my former deputy. Right? So she was pushing, before I got there, she was pushing for maternal health work to come out of the office. And it was a little like pushback, a little stagnant, like not really seeing the importance. And then we got, we had it at the office, we had the report, we put out a report, we had all the things, we're doing everything. And then what happens? The public advocate himself, him and his wife become impacted, right? Yes. So just, in that space, not realizing how we're helping others in the city, in turn helped him and his wife, right? Yeah. So in those incidents, like what we're working on at the office, and we have legislation. We put out the report on the maternal health and legislation as well. So in conjunction with the women majority-led city council.
I'm sorry,
thank you very much.
Women majority-led city council.
Women, yes. So we were able to get our bills passed. So,
that's a round of applause worthy. Like that is huge. That is absolutely huge.
So, so those are the things that we have been working on at the office, and we still got work to do, right? And these are my reproductive sisters here. They have been standing side by side with us at press conferences to push the legislation for our report. They helped out with our report. We're in the middle of updating the report because that was from 2021, and a lot has happened. So we're in the middle of updating it right now, and we're looking to partner with our city government and our state government. We have the borough president for the Brooklyn and the Bronx actually have put money into maternal health care and reproductive justice. And then the mayor has something. So that's on a municipal level. And then working with with legislators, like state legislators, like Assemblymember Zinnerman that just spoke, and Ranice Bashard Hemmerlin. These Senator Leah Webb, Senator Sambra Brook. So they're in this space fighting for us on a state level with Assemblymember Zinnerman. So that's how we're working. We're listening to the advocates. We're partnering with those that are doing the work to make a better outcome for all those.
So like Representative Alma Adams said, if you don't like the policies, you may need to change the policy
right,
makers.
Absolutely.
We just so happen to have some policy makers in this state that are clear about what time it is and are using their position in order to navigate that space.
I mean, it took a while, but we're here.
Yeah.
It took a while,
but doesn't it always, though? Yes. It rarely happens that we get the justice we deserve just by happenstance. We just walk in one day and boom, there goes some justice. That hardly ever happens that way. We have to fight for it. We got to demand it. And it helps when you have people who are receptive and responsive, who are in those positions, who can make the decision. So yes, birthing justice is on the ballot. Yes. That's one of the reasons why we have to think about the elections as not just some, I voted for the person who got me the most hyped and excited. Nah, they could be born as I don't know what. But if they've got good policy, and if politics is really saying this is the pool of resources for the given community, and the politicians determine who gets access to what resource, you got to be able to connect reproductive justice, birthing justice to the ballot, because it really does matter. Absolutely. It really does. Dr. Livingston, when you think about reproductive justice, and we spent the first panel talking about what maternal health looks like and how we can think about and structure, rebake that cake, if you will. But when it comes to the legal community, how does someone in your position who is at the top of your game, you are in this field, you are doing this work, how do you intersect with the policymakers and with the legislators who are in a position to create laws that can support all of the insights that you've already shared with us and so many more that you expect experience as a result of your connection to this community?
So I sit on Pennsylvania's Governor Advisory Commission for Women, and I think being in spaces like that, even as an OBGYN doctor who practices medicine every day, the obstetrics, the gynecologic, I have to insert myself into spaces where the policies are going to impact what I do inside of the office, inside of the hospital, inside of the operating room, but more importantly, in the community. And so I think it's important for us to we medical providers to get out of our comfort zone and get into spaces like the legislative spaces. I co-founded an organization called Flow for the Love of Women, and our mission is to eliminate menstrual inequity. You can't have a baby if you're not menstruating, right? So when we're talking about these maternal health and well-being, and as a Black maternal health advocate, I also think about the other spaces of importance, right? Menstrual health, menstrual equity, uterine wellness. It's important for us to focus on uterine wellness. People just disregard the health of the uterus. We know that Black women are 3 times more likely to have things like fibroids. We talked about that in the last segment. And fibroids lead to unwellness. If you're bleeding heavily, you can't go to work. You can't go to school. And so we founded Flow with the intentionality of digging deeper into the pipeline of women and girl wellness and people wellness, because not everybody who menstruate refers to themselves as a girl or a woman. But it's important to also understand that 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 4 people, menstruating people, miss school because of unsafe hygiene, unsafe menstruating patterns, using towels and old products to menstruate. And if they're missing school, then that materializes into a bigger issue, because now they're missing academic opportunities. And if they're missing academic opportunities, now we're translating that into the overall poor performance in the community. And we need girls to be part. What, 8 out of 10 legislators are males. So if we're not teaching boys about menstrual health and uterine wellness, then we are, like, once again, I said in the last segment, working against ourselves. So when I give Flow education series, I do not let them separate the boys and the girls. The boys stay, and we talk about uterine health and wellness. We talk about menstrual equity, so that when I'm talking with high school boys and girls, we are emphasizing the importance of destigmatizing anything woman, anything girl. And that will materialize into helping with maternal health and birthing health. So it's all related. We can thread the needle and make sure that we're all tying all of this in, so that it's not so stigmatized and separated.
I love, because in the first panel you said we could do this. Like, this is a problem with solution.
It's doable.
It's doable. It's doable. We're going to go to commercial break because the man's going to cut us off, because, that's how it happens. But Shawnee, when we come back, because you have spent, even prior to what happened with your own family, you've spent years in this work on the ground as one of the advocates that people like Assemblymember Zinnerman are listening to, that the Public Advocate's Office represented by Farain are seeking to hear from. And I would like if you could start off the next segment talking to us about what reproductive justice activism looks like, what it has looked like in the past, and in light of everything that's happening right now in this society, God help us, what it looks like now and what it needs to, what we need to be thinking about as we figure, how we move forward, how we navigate this space. Because one thing Urban View gonna do, we gonna have talk, but that talk is gonna empower and become action. And I want to be clear that the people understand what the action steps actually are. And then Chanel, I want to find out what's happening in Uganda, sis. What's happening in Ethiopia, sis, when it comes to birthing. I mean, how the motherland need the children to come back home? But that too speaks to what has happened and to the significance of our experience.